All right, everybody. It's just about time here. So what I'm going to do is just do a quick little intro. I want to thank everybody for coming, and especially Tamarack Solar for presenting. This is the 4th day of our conference, and it's our 10th annual, our first virtual conference. So this is new for us, but so far we've had great attendance. Today from 2 to 3, Tamarack will be doing their presentation, and right afterwards, we're going to be doing an open networking session with all of the presenters from today, MT Solar, S5, and Tamarack Solar. That'll be in the open networking session directly following this. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Tamarack Solar team. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and it's great to have everybody here. Let's just take a look. I just got a message that S5 was still wrapping up, so we should be seeing more folks trickle in here in the next few minutes as they finish up. Andrea, can you verify if they've stopped their session yet?
Yes, I will double check.
Okay, Michael just said, yes, they're done. Okay, I guess we can go ahead and get started. And I see folks are still finding their way in, but let me get my presentation pulled up here and we will be underway. And let me resume share. All right, folks, welcome to Tamarack Solar Products presentation of its new racking system. And as you can see from the tagline, after having had some exposure to it, I would classify it certainly as being strong, but simple, easy to use, and intelligent. When David Katz first approached me and told me that he was developing a new racking system, my initial reaction was, gee whiz, the industry needs another racking system like I need a hole in the head. But after I had an opportunity to see the product, plain and simple, it is the best racking system I've ever had exposure to. So the key attributes that we feel really stand out in this racking system is that it's very attractive, incredibly versatile, simple to understand and install, intuitive, and more importantly, it's an affordable way for you to get not only a lower cost racking system than many of the others that are on the market, but one that installs faster, saving you labor time. So as a brief introduction as to who you're going to be hearing from, and I see we've just had a whole slew of folks come in, so welcome to the Tamarack Solar Products presentation for the new innovative FM racking system. My name's Jeff Spies. I'm the president of Planet PlanSets. I'm a friend of David's, and actually my first work in the PV industry was working for David years ago at AEE Solar. But my current company, what we do is we generate permitting plan sets for residential solar installers. I have a lot of other activities in the industry. I serve as secretary for NABCEP. I'm on the board of the California Solar and Storage Association, where I chair the Codes and Standards Committee. I do a lot of work on UL standard technical panels, and I helped make a movie about how the solar PV industry started, where we focused on interviews with the pioneers of the industry. One of the most prominent by far would be my good friend David Katz, who's the founder of Tamarack Solar. David started his work in the PV industry back in 1979, 1980. He founded Alternative Energy Engineering, which became one of the leading distributors in the solar industry in the early years and beyond. And he started working with PV modules in 1980. They renamed the company to AEE Solar, although we used to joke that that was not a very easy name to say either, from Alternative Energy Engineering. And in 2007, AEE brought to market the snap and rack products. So there's a strong pedigree that David's had with the racking industry in the introduction of that product. In 2014, AEE was acquired by Sunrun. And in 2016, David decided to purchase the Iron Ridge pole mount business in Willits, California, which he eventually renamed to Tamarack Solar a couple years later. And in 2019, developed and introduced the Tamarack FM racking system that we're going to talk about. But equally important is Greg McPheeters, VP of Engineering. Greg's got a 20-year history working in the solar industry, starting in 2001 when he developed the Eco Rack for Eco Energies in Sunnyvale, California, which was acquired by Mainstream Energy in 2005. He joined the REC commercial solar team in 2006. Shortly thereafter, launched the Snap and Rack product, and of course, Snap and Rack acquired by Sunrun. And Greg, as of 2020, joined the Tamarack team. So what we'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the Tamarack Solar FM roof mounts. But to start, we're going to show a minute 46-second video that helps capture some of the magic that I feel exists for this racking product.
Tamarack Solar's FM flush mount system is,
you know, one thing I have to stop really quick. I have to start and stop my share just to make sure I've got it configured properly and that you'll see the video smoothly, and share. And if all goes well, this should work beautifully. Just a moment, and let her rip.
Tamarack Solar's FM flush mount system is your best choice when completing a flush mount installation of solar panels. The system has been designed from the ground up to offer maximum versatility, ease of installation, and premium aesthetics. The heart of the system is the FM rail, which features a deep open channel profile, allowing for robust wire management to be done quickly and easily. Rails are connected together with a tool-free splice. Simply slide the rails together to complete the installation. Splices won't interfere with roof mount attachments or the wire management features of the rails. Our 50/50 module clamps secure panels quickly and easily. These clamps have been listed to work as both mid and end clamps with no spacers or size-specific parts required. For the first time ever, one module clamp is all you'll need to complete an installation. We also offer our channel end clamps for projects where premium aesthetics are desired. These clamps secure module frames from the underside, allowing rails to be trimmed flush to the edge of the array for a clean, finished look. Rails are attached to roof mounts via a simple clamp that can be used anywhere along the rail's length. And Tamarack's flashed L-foot provides a quick yet robust mounting solution for composition rooftops. Tamarack FM will offer you the best install experience and system aesthetics at the lowest cost. Visit tamaracksolar.com for more information about the system, technical documents, and our design and configuration tool. Thanks for watching.
All right, so pulling back up our presentation on roof mounts, this is the product we were just looking at in the video. And what?
Hey everybody, it's Nate from Explorers.life, and I teach people how to build DIY campers. And in this video, I'm going to show you a complete start to...
Sorry about that. That looks like an interesting video too, but you can watch that after we're wrapped up today. All right, so going back into the FM racking system, this is a good diagram that shows all the key components, and we're going to talk about them here one at a time. But what I'd like to do now is bring in both Greg and David, who's going to tell you a little bit about how this FM racking system works. And having had the opportunity to be on a rooftop install with this, there's no doubt in my mind, this is probably the simplest and fastest racking system I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And I've worked with many, given the years I spent working for Quick Mount PV in the attachment business. So with that stated, David and Greg, and we do have also joining us here, Brian Teitelbaum, my good friend that I worked with many years at AE Solar. And welcome, Brian, welcome, Greg, welcome, David, and take it away.
Okay, well, I think the video kind of sums the whole thing up. So we could just leave, but we could talk about it a little more. I think the beauty of it is the speed of installation. You know, removing the need for wire clips on the side of rails when you put it in really helps. Having a single tool installation, being able to splice it really, really easily, just makes this thing really easy to put up. Greg, you have any extra comments on that?
Well, yeah, I guess, David, one of the things that really impressed me about this rack was the versatility, and that rail mount adapter is pretty clever because it allows you to attach to virtually any slotted upright surface, whether it be an L-foot, and we'll show that here in a few minutes. But probably the most innovative thing that really can redefine the way the industry operates is the fact that we've got a inexpensive 7-foot rail with an inexpensive splice, which allows you to reduce the cost of shipping logistics. But before we get to that, we want to start with the rail sizes. We've got 3 basic rail sizes, light, standard, and heavy. And David and Greg, maybe you could talk a little bit about how one might make the determination between these 3 rail sizes.
Well, the light rail we designed primarily for places with low snow load, like California, Arizona. Places where you're not going to have tons of snow on it. It makes a low profile mount that's low cost and looks good. The 2.3 rail, a little bit taller, is you're able to get a lot more snow load and more wind load. And the 3.1 rail we designed for MT Solar at first to have a strong rail for their pole mounts. And we're using that mostly on our ground mount, so it could be used on a roof mount.
And there's a comment here from Glenn that says, how is this different from Snap and Rack? It seems very similar. And probably what I would say, Glenn, you notice is that you have that big, generous, wide channel that allows for easy cable management. So that is one similarity. There's a couple rail systems on the market that have that, but obviously it's a real hallmark feature of this particular rail type.
It is very similar to the Snap and Rack Ultra Rail, except the splice is easier to use. Greg, what else would you say?
Yeah, I was going to say, a key difference here, and one of the things that got me really excited about this early on was that the splice is internal to the rail, and that allows it to be co-located with the mounts. So with Ultra Rail, you're going to, as you go to shorter rails, you have the splices can interfere with your mounts, and they're also quite a bit more expensive in terms of the parts and hardware. So that ability to have an open channel system where the splices, the mounts, and the module clamps can all be co-located, and you can still have conductors running through it. That's really an industry first, and that's one of the most compelling features, I think.
In fact, it probably wouldn't be a terrible thing just to hold that rail up for the camera so people can get a better sense in your hand how wide that slot is. And you can see there, you can fit, Greg, have you ever seen a situation where it wouldn't house all the cabling that needed to go in there?
No, I mean, I haven't. I'm sure there's some project out there where somebody's got a bundle of 20 wires that wouldn't fit in there. But for the most part, on a residential roof mount, you've only got a few conductors going through there at a time, or some trunk cables. So. And
they could switch to the taller rail if they have a lot of bundles. If they were planning to do that, they could use a 2.3 rail.
And that's a good question.
Black rail, which is another option for a beautiful installation.
And that's a good question for the user out there. How might they, if they feel like, gee whiz, I'm not sure if there's enough snow load for me to upsize from the 1.6 to the 2.3 rail, how might they get that question answered? Is that some tech support that they go to Brian for?
Well, they would either go to Brian. We have a configurator that's almost done that'll be on the website soon, and we'll announce that when it's on there. We also have engineering letters for 42 states on our website. So you can actually go to your state and bring up the engineering letter, and there's a 90-page set of tables that would allow you to look at snow load, wind load, exposure, and everything, and figure out exactly what you could do. And that will all be in the configuration program pretty soon. But Brian's always there at an 800 number, 24 hours a day to answer your question.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the rail links, because I feel that part of the magic of this product is the way that you've approached rail links to reduce cost of logistics and shipping for installers. Maybe you could address that.
Sure. We started out with a 10.5-foot rail length, which kind of matches conduit, unistrut, other things that people buy from their electrical distributor. It makes it easy to handle. And then one of our customers said, well, why don't you make something we could UPS ship? So we also introduced a 7-foot rail, and we picked 7 feet because it's almost exactly the width of 2 typical grid tie modules. It's 84 inches. 2 modules are typically about 80 inches. So it makes it something that's UPS shippable and a right size.
And one other thing that I think that's very smart is the rail's symmetrical. Maybe you can address, Greg or David, the benefits that come from a symmetrical rail when you're up on a roof.
Greg, you want to talk about that?
Well, sure. You never have to worry if you got the rail the right way. So that's super handy. And of course, the rails are an open channel that is nestable. So for shipping, you get some extra efficiency on shipping, and the rails also tend to protect themselves by being nested together.
Yeah, I have heard stories where folks have gotten non-symmetrical rails on the roof, realized they had to flip them around, and then they have to be looking out for things like overhead power lines or other obstacles so they're not whacking their coworkers in the head. So it's nice to not have to worry about that with a symmetrical rail. It's also worth stating that these are available in both mill finish and black for the 1.6 and 2.3 rail. For the 3.1 rail, it's a standard 7-foot length, which again makes it really easy to ship by UPS. And here's where a lot of the magic comes in. Tell them about how this splice works.
Well, the splice, you just slide the pieces together. I guess you saw it in the video. And the low cost splice means it's not bad to have 10.5 foot or 7 foot rails because it's not adding a lot of cost. And the fact that the mount and the top clamps can go where the splice is or anywhere on the rail. You don't have to design in advance and figure out where the splices are going to be. It makes design a lot easier. And
Greg, can you explain to folks how you achieve your bonding connection between the splice and the rail?
So we actually have a mill finish splice, and the inside of all the rails are mill finish. So even the black rails they're actually painted on the outside. They're not anodized. So we always have very reliable conductivity through the rails just by having it be mill finish aluminum.
Yeah, so what I noticed when I first installed the splice is those top edges, because the tops kind of spring out a little bit, as you slide it into the rail, you get a really nice metal to metal connection on the top edges of that splice in the rail. And it addresses a question Gail asked, asking if you have to get any kind of special listing to use the rail as a wireway. And I will state with authority, having served for 5 years as bonding and grounding task group leader for UL 2703, that no, you don't have to get a special listing. In essence, the 2703 listing on the racking system just makes sure that those rails are properly bonded to ground, so that if any of the insulation on your current carrying conductors was scraped off, you still would have a reliable bonding connection that would reduce the potential of a shock hazard. So with that said, this cost-effective splice allows for something really amazing, and that is you can ship 7-foot rail by UPS or bundle it on top of a 60-cell module or a 72-cell module pallet. And David, maybe you can address how this is financially advantageous.
Yeah, I think anybody who's had shipments of 14 or 17-foot pieces of rail knows that it can cost hundreds of dollars extra to ship them on a truck because of the penalty you pay for having something that's bigger than the back door of the truck. Anything that's larger than 95 inches has a big fee. And it's very likely when you order a bunch of rail that's 14 or 17 feet long, some of them will arrive damaged. I hear those stories over and over again. So this makes it really simple. And for people who are shipping out complete kits to customers, they can put it all together.
True story. When I shipped my rail years back, when I did my install from Sacramento to my home in Chandler, Arizona, outside Phoenix, $900 to ship 5 kilowatts worth of rails by truck. So that is the potential cost penalty that you suffer from when you're shipping rail to more remote job sites. So this solves that problem. And now we'll shift gears and talk about the innovative clamps. There's 2 clamps that could be used on the FM racking system, the 50-50 clamp that you see on the left, and the channel end clamp, which is a hidden end clamp. The thing that's interesting about the 50-50 clamp is it works both as an end clamp and a mid clamp, and that's pretty revolutionary. David, maybe you can talk a little bit about and Greg, the bonding and how these clamps compare.
Why don't you do that, Greg? You're so good at that part.
Sure. What was really the trick here that really made this work is that we figured out that when the bolt comes all the way in contact with the module frame, the bolt head itself resists that twisting motion that you see with most regular mid clamps if you just used it as an end clamp. So that was kind of the original key ingredient to make it work. So it came out of working to develop the end clamp, and then realizing that if it just had the other tab on the end, it would work in both positions. And that's kind of the key. And then of course on the right side you can see the channel end clamp that works from the underside and uses a pretty basic pivot and bolt arrangement to provide the clamping force. And what's great about that design is that it still allows for modules with pretty large flanges to be properly clamped. You really got to get that clamp all the way into the corner notch of the frame. You wouldn't want to just grab the edge of the flange. You need to get all the way up against the box section of the frame. So the geometry and physics of that clamp allow it to do that really well. And the bolt just sticks out the end. So you just stick the driver in the end and tighten it.
Yeah, we do have an interesting question. And before we do that, I'll show the photo, and this is addressing how that how the 50-50 clamp works as an end clamp too. but as well as a mid clamp there. But there was a question from Glenn asking this. So the bonding between rails via the splice are just by friction, and I guess friction, yeah, because that splice is solidly in contact with both rails. So the bonding connection, I'm confident, being that it has to go through limited short circuit testing, is highly reliable.
Yeah, there are pins in the bottom of the top clamp, and the pins penetrate the anodizing in the module frame. It's hard to see it in the picture, but we've got the UL listing from Intertech for bonding and grounding for those pins, and they're fine. And a lot of companies use pins like that.
Yeah, these pins have been used for quite a few years and are, I think, advantageous to the vampire fangs that sometimes you see on other clamps that when tightened too hard could potentially crack the glass. This pin mechanism dramatically reduces the potential for that problem occurring. There's another question from Marco, and I don't know if I understand it fully. He's asking, can the rails themselves be used integrated with pedestal mount systems? I think maybe I'll answer that by saying any upright that has a hole through it or a slot, Marco, you can use the rail mount adapter with. And Michael says, interesting product. He says he's got another rail that's his go-to, but he was looking at how you might compare dollar per watt. And he says, I'm sure you've looked at this. And based on my asking that question, Michael, David seems to feel that he can provide a very attractive price. David, maybe you can comment more effectively than myself.
Our plan is to be the lowest cost option for a high quality rail. I think you'll find it saves you money in not only in shipping, but also in the cost of the parts.
Well, now let's look at the way the module clamps works here. It works as both mid clamp and end clamp. One of the things, Greg, you mentioned, which I find to be really fascinating, is this clamp, when it's installed, by just compressing that plastic spring easily, you can put this even over the top of a splice. That's unusual.
Right, you can put the clamp anywhere.
Yeah.
And one size is going to fit every module from 30 to 40 millimeters frame. So you can stock in your truck one size clamp for end and mid and not have to worry about having spacer pieces or different size L feet things to match your module, getting on the roof and having the wrong parts.
And if you have a module frame that's a little over 40 millimeter?
Well, we actually have a second clamp. We call it the 5052. And it's got a longer bolt. And so you can go up. We did that for people who are using SunPower, just in case, because SunPower's frames seem to get pretty close to 2 inches.
Another feature I really like about this clamp is that it's self-standing, so you can kind of put them all in place. They'll all stay up and then put your modules in and slide the clamps in. But you'll see in just a moment how darned easy it is to put this clamp anywhere on the rail you want. And here's this nice little video that demonstrates that. Snugs right up, and then of course you just tighten it down with your wrench and away you go. So it's a really intelligently designed clamping system. As an alternative, if aesthetics really matter, the channel end clamp can be that go-to. And Greg, maybe again just describe the method of installation for this.
Sure, and that original video you showed shows it as well, but basically it's going to come from the underside. So the usual install method is that you most people will cut that rail to length first. So you'd actually place the module, mark your rail, lift the module up, cut it flush, and then you preload the clamp, lower the module, and then just tighten the clamp. So it's pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it.
Greg, that brings up an interesting question. What's your best advice for when you're cutting rail like that in the field? Any guidance you can give folks?
I feel like the general consensus is you get the cleanest cut with a bandsaw. Just the battery-powered handheld bandsaws seem to be what most people use. You can certainly do it with a Sawzall, but it does tend to shake and vibrate and not make as clean of a cut.
Well, the good thing about that is you've got a really clean end cap that can make that look a little less rough if you didn't have a clean cut. But these end caps just push right on. A really nice, attractive appearance. And you can see with this image, when you're using that channel clamp, all you see is the end of the rail. So this is very, very clean, very attractive. Now, let's see if we can talk a little bit about this really clever rail mount adapter and how this differs from some of the other products on the market that might just have a side bolt slot. but this gives you a lot of attachment flexibility. And what I'd like to do, first I'll show a diagram, and then I'm going to turn off the screen share, and we're going to take a look at David and Greg that'll have some parts in their hands. But you can see that what you do is just lower the rail down onto the adapter, tighten the bolt, and boom, that rail is secured in a very robust way. But let me now turn off screen share. And David, I think you've got a few different attachments there with you, and Greg maybe also.
I've got a few. This is a, I guess we already saw how the rail goes on. It's simply, these parts arrive loose, and you just put the rail on and tighten the bolt on the other side. I don't know if I wasn't paying attention if you could see all that.
No, we're seeing it now here.
So this is an L foot on top of an S5. Oops, I did that. But I'm not an installer. This is an S5 clamp. You can use it on an S5. We have a ground mount for building ground mounts where you can use a U-bolt and attach it to a piece of pipe for a large ground mount. What else do we have here? You can have a tile hook, and certainly you could connect it to a tile hook the same way. And for people who like deck mounts, you could use something like a, I forget the name of the company. We don't want to advertise for them anyway, but you use a deck mount, you just screw into the deck and bolt the L foot to that. So, and we of course have our own L feet and flashing. The best way to go, and you just flash the L foot. If I get my hands in the right place there. Flashing slides over the L foot. It comes with a lag bolt with a seal.
Hey, David, could we take a closer look at that L foot and how it fits into the flashing there? Maybe you can hold that up to the camera, yeah, sure, so that people can get a little closer look.
Let's see, it's like that. So the L foot, I should have had a roof here. The L foot is there, the flashing just slides right over it, the holes line up. And our flashing is made shorter than most, so you don't have to start pulling nails out when you slide it under. You slide it under the shingles and get up to about where the nail line is, and then put your hole there.
All right, so essentially there's no kind of roof attachment that we can think of that this won't attach to. As long as it's got an upright surface with a hole through it, the rail mount adapter or the mount adapter, it will work with virtually any roof attachment. There is a question is, will it work with solar hook? The answer is yes. You can ask us all the different kinds you can think of, and 99% of the time the answer will be yes.
And if you have something that already has the ear, you can just get the rail mount adapter. If you sell the rail mount adapter by itself, that'll go through any mount that has a 5/16 or 3/8 inch hole or slot or ears. So you can use anybody's that you like if you don't like ours better.
All right, so let me turn.
Ours is less expensive.
Jeff, I might add one comment too.
Sure.
So this is a different approach than having a bolt slot that runs the length of the rail. And just to comment on that quickly, you can see that there's relatively little material in the rail. And we get the strength out of that mount adapter piece. That's what's really supporting the rail. It's well supported on both sides because the adapter is kind of a little triangle. When you compare this to just putting a bolt slot in the side of the rail, the bolt slot needs a lot more material just to handle the load that's really concentrated on the head of that bolt. And what that means is you end up putting a lot of extra material into the rail and paying for it for the whole length of the rail. And you're also putting material that's kind of in the middle of the rail versus being at the top and bottom. So it doesn't help with strength as much. So that's sort of a key piece of the economics here. And that's what allows us to have really the lowest cost rails out there. The rails would be more expensive if we had a bolt slot in there. So I just wanted to comment on that as sort of the driving force behind this.
Yeah, in fact, I was discussing this just yesterday with David Katz as a really brilliant stroke of value engineering genius, that you've essentially taken the material out that doesn't provide value and you've put it into a smaller piece here, the rail mount adapter, helping you make this the most cost-effective racking system that doesn't compromise quality and structural integrity. That's an important thing.
And as we said, that rail mount adapter can come from either side, so you don't have to worry about which way the rail's pointed.
Now, when we talk about wire management, there was a question earlier about this, but this gives a good idea of how a standard trunk cable can go right down into the channel, obviously your PV cables. If you have modules with the junction box near the top of the long frame side, then those drop right in the rail usually, because it's usually, within an inch or two or three of where those cables come out of the junction box. On the other hand, and maybe you can address, David or Greg, some of the strategies when you've got the newer split cell modules that have the junction boxes in the center of the module. Usually you got to use one cable clip on the module frame to keep that PV cable elevated off the roof surface. Any guidance there, fellas?
That's certainly a way to do it. What do you think, Greg? The other idea is you can put a third rail in, have super strength, and put your wires right down the rail. They're so inexpensive.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what you described is what most people do and makes the most sense.
Yeah, so but if your junction box is toward the top, you just drop your conductors right in that rail and it forms a really robust wire management solution that's clean. It's about as clean as I know that exists in the industry. So, again, it can handle a pretty good bundle of rails, especially if you upsize to the 2.3. Now, you've also got what's called an MLPE mounting adapter, although it's used for more than just module level power electronics, nothing more than a channel nut, bolt, and washer. And Greg, can you talk a little bit about some of the creative things people have mounted to the rails?
Oh, well, I don't know if I have any specific examples, but certainly, I think we've already seen a few pictures of people making furniture and things out of the.
Well, that's a little more creative, I thought.
Yeah.
You're talking about like junction boxes, like a junction box or a conduit clamp.
Yeah. You can hang also. It's just a basic way to attach pretty much anything to the rail. So I don't know if you want to hang a weather station off the end of a rail or an anemometer or certainly conduit and any type of junction box. It gives you lots of flexibility. And incidentally, you can also use the L-foot for mounting conduit and junction boxes as well. That the L-foot in the photo is attached to the roof. But if you turn that L-foot 90 degrees, you could just bolt a junction box to it or something like that.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Between those two components, you've got a lot of flexibility and can add pieces and parts.
It's like an erector set, so you can build furniture out of it, right?
You definitely can, and you wouldn't be the first.
All right, so
back to the wire management real quick. I've spent more time on a roof trying to get all the wires hung up on those little clips. And it took me to put the modules on. You'll find this saves you a ton of time not dealing with those little metal side clips that everybody uses on other rails.
Oh, and zip ties as well. They have a finite life. There's just not a lot of plastic in them. They start breaking after 10 or 15 years, or the squirrels chew through them. So having the conductors inside the rail, they're much more protected from rodents, and they're going to hold up a lot longer.
And we designed this rail so a squirrel's mouth won't fit in it. So you have to worry less about squirrels. You don't have to worry so much about putting a skirt around your array because all your wires are protected.
All right, now switching to flashing, there is this flashing, and I'll turn off the screen share in just a moment. But what was interesting is this is one of the first flashings I've seen that was designed to slide up to the nail line. You don't have to pull the nail, and maybe David, you can show folks again after I turn off screen share that flashing, and Greg, you could talk a little bit as an installer about your experiences and why this you feel is going to be a little bit easier.
This was a late addition relatively to the line, but basically looking at what was out there and just trying to boil this roof attachment down. There's kind of a trend in the industry right now to micro flashings, no flashings, which proceed with caution, right? We wanted to do something that just solved the immediate issue, which is that there is some question about when you start popping nails all the way up in the roof, what is that doing to the integrity of the roof? So smaller flashing addressed that.
Speaking from the background of somebody who spent 6.5 years of his life focused on the flashing business, I don't feel that the term micro and flashing should ever go together in a good way.
Sure, yeah, it's really not a flashing. So this is just something that's really simple, but we've just tried to boil it down to be the simplest thing that would provide a really reliable, effective, but simple solution for attaching to comp roofs.
All right, well, let me get my screen share turned back on. We'll talk about a couple other important components and then shift into the pole and ground mounts here. And we'll take all your questions before we're finished today. We will have answered every question as long as you hang in there with us. But let me just turn on share screen, and you can talk a little bit about your ground lug here.
Well, the ground lug's a pretty common ground lug. It's very simple, and you can slide anything from 10 to 6 gauge wire through it, tighten it down, and you're done. You only need one ground lug per row of modules. You don't have to put one on each rail because they're bonded by the modules and the pins. So essentially for every separate row of modules, you need one ground lug.
Excellent. And then, you know, this is just, again, a quick summary of all the components that we've been discussing. And I think that anybody who gives it a shot tends to find out very quickly how easy it is to understand, which is really important when you look at the often transition in the workforce on rooftop solar installation. Having a racking system that's easier to learn tends to be a tremendous business advantage for contractors that are hiring folks on a regular basis that are coming in to do the rooftop installs. Generally speaking, if you've got one reasonably knowledgeable rooftop supervisor, the other laborers that might be on the roof can quickly and easily come to grips with how you put this system together in a really straightforward manner. And as stated earlier, this is fast to install. It's really easy. And I would argue probably the most intuitive racking system I've seen out there. So when you use a product like Tamarack, you're guaranteed happy solar owners when all's said and done. Except Bernie doesn't look so happy, but I think he's kind of inwardly happy. So with that said, go ahead, David.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you come to the next hour where we're gonna be doing the tabling part of the trade show, we're gonna give away a UPSable system that'll mount 8 modules. So somebody can get one for free and try it.
And that's an interesting point. I think where this comes to be a really big business advantage is if you have a customer that might be an hour away or more from a stocking distributor of rail, shipping by UPS tends to be a tremendous cost benefit. So you effectively can get all the products to the job site in an inexpensive manner. If you're going to ship a pallet of modules, again, just strap that 7-foot bundle of rail to the top of the pallet, and you know, you're helping reduce your logistic costs and make the installation on the roof a little easier since you're not handling long rail.
Yeah, I would look at it as people introduced railless mounting to lower the cost of shipping and handling. And this is kind of the perfect cross between railed and railless. It's easier to install than railless because it has the rails, easier to align, but has the low cost shipping and handling.
There's an interesting question, Greg, here from Mark that says, do we publish the area and mechanical properties of the rail for use in design? And does the splice maintain the full capacity of the rail? So I think what he might be referencing, and we've seen this on projects that might exceed the span tables that you've got in your literature, because when you go over a 12-12 slope, then you have to do engineering using the modulus elasticity and the moment of inertia in the cross section. Is that information that would be available for designers?
Yeah, we do have that information. You know, an important detail about open channel rails is that the engineering is based on testing, and that allows us to demonstrate that in the loads that the system sees, there won't be any buckling failures. So that's a key piece of it, that there's quite a bit of testing behind the engineering documents that we have. You can use the splice anywhere along the length of the rail except in the overhang. And so
just to clarify, Greg, the splice itself, that should be inboard of 2 attachments. Is that correct?
It can actually be in that last span, just not right at the end of the last span. What did we get? Was it a third? But basically, if you're using full lengths of rail, this is never really relevant.
Granted.
Anyway. So we basically got it boiled down to where that splice can go anywhere. And that again is based in part on testing and the multiplicity of mounts along the length of the rail. So while the splice itself in a straight span test will not match the full strength of the rails, it's on the 1.6 and 2.3, it will on the 3.1. That's not relevant. What's relevant is that in any common installation scenario, it can go wherever you need to put it. You don't have to think about splice locations.
All right, fantastic. Well, let's proceed forward to talk a little bit about the pole and the ground mounts. And I suppose, David, you can go ahead and take over and discuss the side of pole mounts here.
Okay, yeah, this is the original business that I bought from Iron Reach. They wanted to get rid of and it's because it's not a very big business. We make small pole mounts that are used in telemetry, security, lots of places where somebody's mounting a module that's like 100 watts or less. We sell thousands of these, and you see them all over telephone poles where there's flashing lights and cameras and things. It's just an old product that started with 2C's metalwork in the 80s, and we're still making that same product.
And just important to reference that this is for smaller modules, 200 watts and less.
Yes.
Probably wouldn't be appropriate for the standard 60 cell module used for grid tie.
We have one side of pole mount that will mount two 60 or 72 cell modules actually on the side of a pole if somebody needs one. Traffic people use that often.
And you could do portrait and landscape with the side of pole mounts, David?
It depends on the mount and the size of the module. There's optimal ways of doing it based on the width of the back connection. We call it a bucket that's connected to the pole, and the hole spacing on the module. And the website covers that pretty well.
All right.
So here's a couple of examples of how we make them. Then we have some top of pole mounts that we recently came out with that are engineered for up to 150 mile an hour wind, and we have ones that go up to 6 modules. The STP version goes up to 3 modules. And we actually had some of them re-engineered for 165 miles an hour for an airport in the Virgin Islands. And they're up about, I think, 20 or 30 feet on a pole. So they're really strong. And the beauty of these mounts is they're universal and they're in stock. So if you need a small mount, you can call up and have one shipped within a couple of days.
And there was a question earlier about what the maximum wind speed for the racking system is. And at least here in the STP top of pole mounts, you've got PE stamped and certified engineering letters that allow designs up to 150. Greg, maybe you can address on the FM racking system, what's the maximum wind speeds that the different size rails are capable of managing to?
I believe we ran the engineering packets up to 180. Obviously, those are extreme winds, and so you're not going to have big long spans, and you probably don't want big long spans at that point. But yeah, I believe we ran everything to 180.
And
okay,
over more than 50 PSF of snow load. I can't remember how high the engineering tables go, but it might be 70 or 80 or 100 PSF.
And for those that are interested in high wind speed areas, granted that's real common in Florida and the Gulf Coast and anywhere that's hurricane danger, with ASCE 716, the newest structural code, and I've done some presentation recently at the NABCEP conference on this topic, you could see a doubling up to a quadrupling of the number of roof attachments necessary to accommodate ASCE 716 once it gets required by the residential code in Florida. It's not yet, but just be tuned to the fact that in the not terribly distant future, the number of roof attachments you'd need in a place like Miami is going to go up dramatically. So we can address that later in some more technical trainings that Tamarack will put on. But now I guess what we can do, David, is take a look at your large pole mounts here. And
we call them large. It goes up to 6 modules. It's nothing like what you would get from MT Solar, where you go up to, I think, 24 modules. But for a small system, this is something off the shelf you can buy and have shipped in a couple of days. All of our mounts ship UPS. All these pole mounts can be shipped by UPS, which makes shipping low cost also.
And the materials of construction, David?
They're G90 pre-galvanized steel and aluminum.
Got it. And again, this one here would be engineered or have certified engineering letters for up to 150 mile an hour, which is pretty darn good for a pole mount.
Right. The 6 module mount, I think realistically only goes to 140 with certain angles. The 4 module mount goes to 150.
And we just had one of the commenters that's anonymous say, thanks, we're located in the Bahamas. So obviously wind speed tends to be foremost on their mind in all the design considerations.
That's kind of why we did this, because it seems like our competitors for small mounts like this, they always say 90 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour. They don't really give it. I called somebody, one of the competitors once, said, what do you do when somebody wants 150 mile an hour mount? And they said, we don't call them back. So at least we have something with engineering. And the engineers tell me that it's all got to be designed for 1.9 times the wind that they're rating it for. So you can expect it's really going to work at these wind speeds.
Now you've got a different type of a pole mount called the PGRM. What makes this different from the previous series?
This is an even low cost mount. I don't know if anybody's ever used Lorenz pumps, but Lorenz, which is a German water pumping company, offers a mount that I saw when I was visiting an installer in Europe. And it was impressive. It's really easy to ship because it only has 3 different kinds of parts. It uses a horizontal 3-inch Schedule 40 pipe and a vertical, or more than one vertical if you go wide enough, 4-inch pipe. And there's an end clamp and there are mid clamps. And we just kind of copied theirs and made it about twice as strong. We're using bigger U-bolts. We're using thicker steel for everything and a larger horizontal pipe. And we're just saying that it's as good as theirs. It'll do a 90-mile or 100-mile-an-hour wind. It could probably do more. These are mostly sold to pumping companies in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, where there's a lot of cattle ranching. And it's very low cost shipping because all you're paying for shipping is that pipe cap in the center and the end and mid rails. That's the cap. It's made of hot dip galvanized steel and it's 3/8 of an inch thick. So it's really heavy duty.
So again, this is the key for this is lower cost systems where people are looking for economics, and they probably aren't going to need the structural engineering letters when they're just putting up a pole mount to run a water pump for a tank for cattle.
Right, and you can go up to 4 full-size modules on one cap, and you can go up to 6 or 8 on 2 caps. I usually say 6 because the horizontal pipe is only available in 21-foot lengths. So you have to get into splicing pipe if you want to go longer, but you can certainly do it. I think we had somebody that went 70 or 80 feet with multiple legs, and it looked beautiful.
Well, let's take a step up to the true ground mount offering that Tamarack provides that's for the larger ground mount installations that you might occasionally run into. And the heart of this product is the heavy duty 3.1-inch rail, which supports 12+ foot spans and does come PE stamped with certified engineering letters for applications up to 170 mile an hour. And maybe David, you can talk a little bit, and Greg, about how this rail differs a little bit from the 2 smaller sizes, the 1.6 and the 2.3. And I think the Splice tells that story the best.
Yeah, I think somebody asked about structural splices, and the splice in the 3.1 rail is actually structural. It's as strong as the rail, so it doesn't take any strength away from the rail. And you get your bonding connection by putting a self-drilling screw in the side of this one, which you don't have to do on the smaller ones. But it does give you a fully structural bonded rail.
And Greg, would you put a screw on both sides of the splice, or would you leave it floating in certain applications?
The screw is purely there to meet the bonding requirements for the UL certification. If you remember back to the splice that we use for the 1.6 and 2.3 rails, it's basically like a little taco. You squeeze the top of your taco together to slide it in, but it has that pressure out that makes the bonding reliable. Here, because we made a closed box section splice to just make it as strong as possible, we needed the one fastener to ensure reliable bonding per UL. So there's no real advantage to adding more screws unless it makes you sleep better at night. Then I suppose.
Well, I guess the question is, you need a screw on either rail that's attached to the splice, though, so that they're physically connected together. You can't leave one floating, so to speak.
That's right. You would put one screw on each side is the requirement. But if you wanted to add more than that, you certainly could. That said, you do want to be careful because every time you put one of those screws in, you're actually drilling a hole in the rail. So that line where the screws go is, determined based on having the least impact on the strength of the rail when you drill that hole. So that is the place to put those fasteners.
But that said, you can put this splice virtually anywhere, even possibly outboard of an attachment, and have it still perform its full structural duties.
That's right. It's a full structural splice. I mean, I think our general, best practices would be use a full stick of rail at the end put your short pieces in the middle, just because the ends always have more wind and vibration and whatnot. But it is designed to be a full 100% match of the strength of that rail, and that's been tested.
All right, there's a comment that I have to read because it's a nice one. It says, "You guys have a great system. Is there a way we can add extra rails to achieve 180 mile an hour?" And Greg, maybe you can comment on that. Would a third rail resolve the 150 mile an hour limitation for some of the systems?
Well, we have
Probably,
180 on the roof mounts already with these rails.
That's true. So this is certified for 180 on roof mounted systems. And how about ground mounts, Greg? Could we manage 180 there?
I'm pretty sure we get there. I do believe in many cases you'll end up with a third rail when you get to a certain point. And so it just depends on your angle and you know, what the exposure categories and all those other things are. But it certainly seems this would be a rail that you would do that with.
Yeah, our letters go to 170. Our stamped letters on the 3.1 go to 170 for the ground mount letters.
We're right on target for time, but one of the things I will throw out there is that because of the commonality in the 3.1 inch rail to the two smaller sizes, many of the same components like the 50/50 clamp, the wire clip, the rail mount adapter work on this rail also.
Correct.
And you've got essentially the MLPE adapter, the ground lug. So essentially all of the key parts that make the smaller two rails so convenient to use on the roof make this rail very convenient to use on ground mounts. Or if you've got a particularly heavy duty roof mount, such as, let's, for argument's sake, say you have some really big beams in your roof structure that you could do really long spans, this might be a nice option to consider when you're getting like 8 or 12-foot spans between large beams that would be able to provide a sufficient structural attachment for compliance with the roof codes. One additional thing that I want to show folks is that you've got a pretty clever way to configure the ground mount with these fittings, David. So maybe you could tell them what we're looking at here and how they are used.
Well, these fittings are made by a company that's probably well known called Hollander Speed Rail. And they're UL listed for bonding and grounding also, and they fit 2-inch Schedule 40 pipe. So we can make these pole mounts with 3 parts: a solid T, which is the picture in the center of the screen, with a vertical pipe and a horizontal pipe tied together; a flexible T, which is used for front to rear, north-south cross bracing, which is required in some wind loads, and it also allows you to have the vertical pipes further apart if you have the cross bracing; and a pipe mount clamp that attaches the rail to the pipe. That's all you need to build a rack besides our 3.1 inch rail.
So it's convenient. They can go to their local pipe supplier, get the 2-inch piping that they're going to need, and then these Hollander fittings and the pipe mount clamps ship in a relatively small cardboard box, so you can do big installs in remote areas without a lot of high shipping costs.
Yeah, and if for people who have used the Iron Ridge SLA mount, it's very similar to that. You can actually even use their configuration tool to design it all.
Well, I will just try to get to the point where we could do a few questions before we go into the networking session immediately following this. But I'll just state out, you know, again, based on my personal experience. And by the way, I'm a unpaid spokesperson friend of David's. I'm not doing this for any compensation. I'm just doing it because I always enjoyed, he's like, David's like Tom Sawyer painting the fence. And when you walk past the fence, he says, "Would you like to help me paint the fence? It's a lot of fun." And that's what it's like working with David. So with that said, we'll be happy to entertain any questions that folks have. And I see there's a couple here. One from Charlie says, "Great looking products. This is one of the most engaging webinars I've ever attended." Darn, I thought we'd be the most engaging, Charlie, but thank you for the compliment. Anonymous says, "Good stuff. We've been reviewing your products for the past few months." Or said he didn't get the screenshot of Bernie, and or just for the sake of you, I will give you Bernie's picture one more time then. Let's see. There was a question here. The gentleman in Bahamas or woman in Bahamas, can't tell because it's anonymous. I'm not sure why they're anonymous, but it says, our company uses Lorentz pumps, but we can't use their racks because they're rated to 150 mile an hour. So Is that something that, you know, you guys can help with? And maybe so.
They mean they need more than 150 miles an hour. We should talk about it.
Yeah.
We're working on developing a way of getting engineering on it. The engineer we deal with says he can't engineer U-bolts. But I should probably talk to Iron Ridge's. Whose are they using? They were using.
I think Iron Ridge, maybe. Let me just see.
Oh, yeah, we certainly go over 150. I thought they were.
Yeah, he's using Iron Ridge on those projects, David.
Oh yeah, so we can go over that. Our rail is pretty similar. Our 3.1 rail is pretty similar in strength to the XR 1000. Would you say, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually the other two rails, the medium rail, the 2.3, is about the same as XR 100, and the 1.6 is about the same strength as the XR 10 or the Snap and Rack Ultra Rail 40. So if you're used to any of those, we're very similar.
Okay, guys, I think we're going to wrap it up because our networking session is starting here in a few moments, and we need people to give them a little bit of time to log out of here and into there. But I would love to thank Tamarack for this presentation. It was fantastic, and further questions can be addressed here in the networking session. So we want to thank everybody, and we'll see you again in a few moments.
And we'll have 2 different rooms. David
Yes.
and Greg will be in one. Myself and Brian will be the other. I'm looking forward to chatting with some of you folks. Come over and say hi, even if you're not going to ask us a technical question.
Yes.
We'd love to see you. And thanks so much for attending.
Thanks, Jeff and David
will
and
be there,
everybody.
too. CC,
Okay.
Oh, it's CC too.
And CC.
And CC, I have to say one last thing. CC, who works customer service for Tamarack, said in the comments, we never don't call people back. So you're going to get good service also.
All right, guys, we'll see you shortly. Thank you.